Hi guys.
Hi Ben, you alright?
Yeah, good. Yeah, you.
Yeah, doing fine, thank you. Yeah,
We've got a couple more minutes and then we'll make a start.
cool.
Oh, I've just seen Libby's typing in the chat. Hi Lib. Okay, fine. As long as you're all right, that's all good. Okay. Well, we're at past, so I think it could just be the three of us this evening, but that's fine. We'll make the video, and so I'm going to record this again, but I'm going to record it on Zoom,
Yeah,
and then I'll use this and put the video up on YouTube afterwards, so it will still go out onto YouTube.
cool.
And there were a few people who came and watched the video from last week on YouTube, so we'll do it that way. I think it's going to probably be a bit easier. So let's do this and this, and I'll get rid of that one, and I can bring this one over. So this was our video from last week. So last week we got to bringing all the files into the media pool, and then dropping them into the timeline. We looked at kind of cross-fading things from one to another, didn't we? And just sort of how we can put all those tracks into each other. Is there anything from last week that you wanted to kind of recap in particular?
No, I think from last week, um, also like, the only thing that I haven't really done, because you talked about separating the tracks
Oh yeah.
a lot more, but you said we'd probably come on to that today because that links more with like the audio sessions and stuff. I've not done that before. Generally, I put it all on one, and if I've like words for songs, I put that on the next one above, and then maybe like an overlay in the corner of the next one above that. But I've not really split it in the way you have so far. So I guess the audio things on that might be useful. That's the only really thing
Okay.
from last week.
Fine. Right. Well, let's jump in there then. In that case, so let's look at the tracks. So it's helpful for this bit then to give ourselves as much space as we can on our timeline. So if what I'm going to do is at the minute on this options window here, there's a few things that we can have turned on which can be helpful, but it's also worth kind of knowing how to toggle them on and off. So at the top here we've got the waveforms, so that's our audio waveform, so we can see when the volumes are going up and down, so
Yeah.
we can see where the audio is. For now I'm going to turn that off, and then the other one that we've got here in the middle gives us a little picture of what's going on in the video clips. And again, I'm just going to turn that off just for now so that we can reduce all the sizes of those so we can see more of the tracks. So if we're going to start looking at some tracks, we can see what's going on from one to the next. So the reason then that I would say that is worth, and actually I'm just going to make this full screen so we can see everything. There we go. So the reason then that I say that it's worth putting things on different tracks is, as you say, when we come to the audio editing. So our audio editor is Fairlight, which is this, what's that, fifth tab along at the bottom down here. So if we jump into Fairlight and we see our audio settings all on here, just going to see if we can budge these all up a little bit. Again, give ourselves a bit more space. What we see here is much the same as on our main editor. So we have a timeline along the bottom here. But the key thing we're going to really look at is our mixer window over the side over here. It just makes everything so small. Just see if I can see any more of that. Let's maybe turn the meters off. Okay, right, we've got a bit more we can see here now. So again, as with the editing window, there's lots of sections that you can turn on and off to show more or less of the features, but every time you turn something on you then lose space for seeing other things. So again, it's just worth knowing how to turn all those bits on and off as well. So the mixer is the key thing that we're going to look at here. And with our mixer, just like an audio mixing desk, we have channels, and for each of the channels we can put different things in here. So you've got effects One of the effects that I use quite a lot is a compressor. So if you click on the little plus sign on the effects and go to Fairlight Effects, and I use the vocal channel down here, and this will pull up a little window that looks like this. Now you can just use this one little window. Can I reduce the size of that? No, it doesn't look like it. You can use just this one little window, because this one actually gives you a compressor on the side over here and a graphic equalizer over this side, so you can use those two things, and in theory that might be enough for everything that you need. But actually I just use it for the compressor here. So I don't know if are you familiar with compressors, how they work, what they do? So a compressor, what a compressor is going to do is it takes the loudest peaks of audio, and the main setting, if you do nothing else with a compressor, the main setting to look at is this one called the threshold. And what a threshold does is it's if you like, it's like a kind of sound activated switch. And what you're saying is, at what level do I want the sound to turn this switch on and off? So if you picture your waveform again, sound going up and down, and we set our threshold at a certain point. So when the levels jump up to a certain point, they go through that threshold. And what the compressor is saying that is anything that goes above this threshold, we're going to compress it down. We're just going to squash up the tops of the sound. So when you get sound that's going to be jumping right up, just helps to control that a little bit more and make it a bit more even. So it can be helpful to have a little compression on there. So we can take a compressor, and you can see there what the kind of graphical representation is trying to show you is if the compression wasn't on, your audio would carry on in this line. So you can see everything below the threshold doesn't get affected. And if the compressor wasn't there, it would carry on that grey line, and the audio wouldn't be affected at all. But because the compressor's on, everything that goes beyond that point is now being squashed down. And the further up that line it goes, the more it's being squashed. Yep. So can you see how that's sort of showing that? You've got here a ratio control. Ratio tells you how much you're going to compress that by. So as I take the ratio up, that angle is compressing more, and you take it down, the compressor's less. So you can adjust other settings on there as well, but to begin with, if you've not used compressors before, then just start off by changing the threshold and just getting it to a point so it's not compressing everything all the time, but just when suddenly somebody speaks out, it just helps to control those a little bit. And then the other thing that you can then do is the gain control here. You can add what sometimes you call it makeup gain, because you're then chopping the tops of the audio off. You can end up with all the audio ending up a bit lower down. So what you can do is you can reduce the tops, keep it so that the tops are not going up too high, but then boost the whole lot back up again. So instead of it all ending up really quiet down the bottom, you chop the tops off and then lift the whole lot up. So that's where your gain control comes in here. So you can add some gain in if you find that the sound, when you've started compressing it down, is just too quiet. You can boost the whole lot back up again afterwards. So it can be useful to put a little bit of a compression on there. So I'd often add a compressor on that channel. And then depending on what the audio is like, the only other thing that I would generally tend to use is the noise reduction tool on here, which again, that can be quite useful. The way that this works, I don't think any of the audio that I've got here is going to be any good because it's all quite clean. There's not really anything that's very noisy. But what you do is, or at least the way that I use it is, I put it into manual mode. You can put it into auto mode and it will try and automatically do it. But if you put it in manual mode, I tend to find this works the best. And then you need to find a section of your audio where there's nothing else happening and all you've got is the background noise. So it can sometimes, if you find that if somebody sends you a file that is really, really noisy, I would actually make this one of the first things to do, because quite often when you start editing, the first thing you're going to do is to chop out all the bits where there's nothing else happening. And those are the bits that you need to find your noise reduction settings. So if you play a clip back and straight away you listen to it and it's just really hissy and noisy and there's all sorts of stuff going on, you just think, oh, that's sounding horrible. The first thing I'll do is to jump into Fairlight, find a section of the video where there's nothing much happening, certainly where there's nobody talking, and all you get is the kind of background noise that's going on. And then you can press this learn button, and then when that learn is activated, as soon as I press play, it's going to listen to whatever is being played at that point in time, and it's going to learn that that is noise. So that's why it's really important you make sure it's not got any speech in it, because if there's any speech playing, it will learn speech as noise. And once it's learned what noise sounds like, it's just going to chop all of that out. So if there's anybody talking, or if there's anything that's important in that section, it's going to learn that as noise and just remove it from your audio. And it can sound really nasty if you get that wrong. So you want to make sure that all you're catching is the background noise. So just find a section where there's nothing else happening, catch that background noise, hit that learn button, press play, and it will play through and just figure out which bits are noise. And then as soon as somebody starts talking again, you need to have turned that off before they start talking. As long as that is activated, everything it hears, it will learn as noise. So you need to make sure. You can go back and do it if you accidentally play it on too long and somebody starts talking, stop it, go back, do it again, but just try and make sure you catch just the bit where the noise is and nothing else if you're going to use that. But it's quite a good helpful tool. If you do have noisy clips, it's worth putting that on.
Does it matter how long that plays for? How long it needs to learn? Can it be?
No, it doesn't seem to. No,
right.
it literally, half a second or something is fine. It can just be a very short bit, and it will pick that out. I think the longer you could give it, the more accurate it would be. But yeah, it doesn't seem to need very much at all. It will pick it out from a fairly small bit. If you have an effect in there that you don't want or isn't working or whatever, you can if you just hover the mouse over them, there are a few options of what you can do. So there's a little drop down arrow and you can click that and just delete the plugin if you want to remove them completely. The little red light over there is like a bypass switch. So if you want to just turn it on and off and just see how much of a difference has my compression made, or whatever it is, you can just toggle that on and off, and it will just bypass that effect. So you can just listen to it with and without and see how much of a difference that's making. And then in the middle, there's a little thing with some adjustments on, which is how you get back to that settings window. So when you're hovering over there in the middle, you can pull the settings back up. I'll take all of those out for now. So those are effects that you could add in there if you wanted to. And then the next thing then that I do is you open up the EQ, and I will almost always do EQ. The only time I wouldn't EQ something if there was a track with background music or something like that on that I probably don't really want to adjust too much. Otherwise, pretty much everything else I'm going to put some EQ on it. Now, the EQ, I find when it comes as default, I don't find it all that helpful. So you've got 6 bands on here, so it's great. It's really, really nice, powerful EQ. There's lots you can do with it. And by default, the 1st and 6th band are actually bypassed. So again, you can turn each of the bands on and off individually as you want to use them. And those 2 are just deactivated, bypassed at the beginning. So you can turn them all on. I would turn everything on. I'd use the whole thing, make full use of it. But if you turn those 2 bands on, it then kind of makes bands 2 and 5 a little bit redundant, because so what we've now got is band 1 is a low cut high pass filter, so everything in the green sections is being removed here, and all you're getting is what's in the open section in the middle. So because number 1 is now a high pass, number 2 was basically also a high pass because of the type of filter it had on here. So we're also going to want to change this as well. And if you click on the type of filter on all of these, you can adjust all of them. and I just make them all the second one down, this with a little plus and minus where you can add or take away frequencies as you need them. So I do that to 2 and 5. So I've now got a high pass, low cut, high pass filter and a low pass, high cut filter at the top. And all the other bands in the middle are all exactly the same. So we then have 4 fully parametric bands in the middle that we can use to find our frequencies and adjust the frequencies. Now, as a rule of thumb, generally speaking, what I would tend to find for speech is there's often a kind of very nasally, honky, not very pleasant frequency about 2 to 2.5 kilohertz. So about that point, 2 to 2.5 kilohertz, you'll find there's a bit of a problem frequency generally for most people, somewhere in that ballpark. When you're trying to do an EQ, I would always say make the problem worse before you make it better. So it's always easier to hear a frequency that's boosted than one that's cut. So find the problem areas, boost it up a little bit and make the problem really, really bad, because it'll be a lot easier to hear it this way. As you're sweeping up and down, you'll find a point where the frequencies will just sound really horrible. And when you know you've got that point, you'll know it. As soon as you hear it, it just sounds awful. And as soon as you've found that frequency, you can then cut it out. And sometimes not a big cut will make quite a big difference. So just a little cut of that frequency, and you can really start to notice that. So it's about 2.5 K. You'll find there's a point around there where you'll probably want to cut a little bit. And then the other one that I also cut quite often is around 500 hertz, which seems to be most people's houses. I mean, the kind of general size of a house, it's going to vary a little bit depending on how big the rooms are. But for a lot of stuff that's being recorded in houses at the minute, there's some very kind of boxy, roomy frequencies down here that, again, are not very nice to listen to. So again, around 500-ish hertz, you'll find another problem frequency point, and you can cut those out. And sometimes I have to put quite a big cut in down here to pull those out. So those are 2 kind of key frequencies that I find pretty much all the time with everything that I'm doing at the minute. There's those 2 frequencies that are going to need to be adjusted. Beyond that then, it's just down to whatever's going on. So if somebody's shot a clip outside and there's a lot of wind noise, you might find you want to use this one to cut out some more of the low frequencies to get rid of some of the wind noise. Or if there's a lot of hiss and a lot of background noise, if you can't remove it with that noise removal tool, sometimes just by taking the high frequencies out on there, you can adjust that way as well. So it's quite a powerful EQ on here. There's lots that you can do with that. You have got even more controls down here because I mean, you might be familiar with some of this from your digital desk. I don't know how much you've played around with the EQ settings on there, but you've got on here your gain control. So this is just another way to boost and cut frequencies here with the gain. And then your Q factor is the width of the curve. So if I show you on number 3, we're taking a nice big cut out there, and you can make it really narrow or really wide. So you can adjust that width. And those are all the same as what you would have on your digital desk at the minute. I don't know whether you've used that much at all.
No, I can't. Gain I'm more familiar with, not really much of the other stuff, in all honesty.
Okay, so it's quite intuitive that because you can just grab them and pull them around, you'll find it quite easy to kind of get to grips with this. So it's worth having a bit of a play with that. You will find EQ helps, and again, you've got the ability on here to be able to turn this on and off and bypass it. So if you're not quite sure whether you've made it better or not, bypass it and have a listen to it with and without the EQ, and you'll hear how much of a difference what you have done has made. And you can say, actually, have I made it better? Have I made it worse? And just either abandon the EQ altogether or adjust it if you find that it's not making it any better. So have a bit of a play with that one and see how you get on. But once we've done all that, that then applies to everything on the first audio channel. So any effects that we add in, any EQ that we add in, is going to go to everything on that audio channel. And this is why I'd say to separate things out, because the EQ settings that you use for worship are not going to be the same as the EQ settings that you're going to use for a preach or whatever else.
Yeah.
So the more tracks, I mean, some of my Sunday morning videos, I could easily have 10 or 12 audio tracks, you know, just putting them out on all the various bits and bobs. There's as far as I'm aware, there's no limit. I mean, there probably is a limit as to how many tracks you can have. It's probably 100 tracks or something that you could have as a maximum. So you're probably not going to run out of tracks. The only thing that does become awkward, as I say, is the amount of space that you have on your screen.
Yeah.
So you can, if you start having to have loads of stuff all on lots of tracks, you can run out of room to actually see what's going on, and that's where it becomes really useful to know how to turn all the little windows and stuff on and off, so you can just have the bits open that you need and get rid of the other stuff when you don't need it. So does that all make sense?
Yeah, I need to have a play with it, but yeah, I get the theory.
Yeah,
more or less. So yeah, I'll have a play around with that. Is there anything you can do? And you might be able to do it through that. If somebody's recorded something and it's been like too loud when they've recorded it, so you've kind of got that distortion almost when it comes through to you. Is there much you can do with that, or are you kind of just left with that because that's what the recording actually is?
Yeah, if that's how it's been recorded, there's not a lot you can do about it. Once it's recorded in, it's
Yeah.
sort of stuck there.
Yeah.
What I would do is I would use compression on that,
Yeah.
because you can't get rid of it, but you can make it quieter, so it can kind of become a bit less obvious. But yeah, once it's there with that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do with that.
Yeah. Okay.
The only other thing that you can do, because is it like when they first start speaking, because normally if they're recording onto like a phone or something, it would automatically adjust the levels. So often if that happens, what it will be is when they first start speaking, they suddenly speak really loudly and the phone wasn't ready for it. But as soon as it's realised that those levels are really loud, it should then bring them down. So have you had clips where it's just consistent all the way through, or has it been just... You have, right, okay. Yeah, so if it's all the way through, yeah, there's really not a lot you can do about that. Either you could go back and see whether they can re-record it for you.
Yeah.
But if that's not an option, then you just have to do the best you can with it.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the other thing that you could do with audio, if it was where it was sort of automatically adjusted, and if you know they start speaking, it suddenly jumps into clip, but then the phone or whatever it is automatically adjusts itself and pulls itself down. The other way you could deal with it is if you've got that the middle option here where you've got your little clips to show you what's going on the video. If you've got that one turned on, then what you get is the little white blobs at the beginning and end of your audio tracks, and that allows you to just put a little fade in on there. So if it's literally just the first thing that they say as soon as they start talking, and you just want to pull that bit down and then it will jump back up and carry on as normal, then you can do it that way as well, and just use that just to make it a bit less obvious. But yeah, once it's there, it's there.
Yeah, okay.
So let's start putting some of these things out then. Let's jump back to this view and we can separate some of these things out. So, so that's one where the video and audio have been unlinked from each other. So I can move the video track completely independently of the audio track, and so you do need to be careful when they're like that. So I'm going to go ahead and link those two back together again. If we just select them both, right click, and down at the very bottom, link clips, we can link those two back together again. And then when I pull one down, the other one will move up. So they'll automatically want to move, so they'll move themselves both onto the new tracks together, which is quite helpful. So we can put that onto there. Now, at the minute, this here is a little text lower thirds thing that we dropped on here last time. I'm actually going to just get rid of that because we're going to come on to a bit more of that later on. So for now, we're going to just put everything out onto separate tracks. So we've now got 4 audio tracks, and again, if you want to keep tabs on things, everything can be labelled, which is nice and handy. So if you just space these out enough so that you get the top bar of label here, and you just click into that bar, we can label it. So that was our countdown timer, so let's just put countdown in there. Then the second one, that's one of the worship tracks, so I'm just going to call that worship 1. This was the other worship track, worship 2, and then sermon. And that, once you've labelled those up, it just makes it a lot easier to know where everything's gone. But also when we jump back into Fairlight, into the audio editing section, those labels carry across onto our mixer.
Right, okay, yeah.
So it then makes it really easy for you to be able to sort of follow on where everything's gone and what you're adjusting when you're adjusting things. So again, it's just worth doing those sorts of things, particularly if you do end up with kind of 10 or 12 or more tracks. It just means that you can monitor where everything's gone, and the same is true for your video as well. So looks like we labelled a couple of these last time. Countdown worship 1, worship 2, and sermon. And then we just know where everything is and what we've got where. You can also, if you really want to, again, when I've had particularly complex services, I have done this in the past. Oh, there's another one that's not linked there. You can colour code things as well. So we can actually select the worship, and if you right click and go colour clip, we can actually start to colour everything up, which again, if you've got loads of stuff going on, lots of tracks, and you want to keep tabs on everything, it can be quite handy just to do it that way, and then you can again just quite quickly and easily visually see what's what and what's going on. Okay, so that's audio and Fairlight. With the other thing with audio is that you also want to you don't need to worry so much about having headroom, and this is one of the things that's different between live sound and recorded sound. With live sound, we're very conscious of the amount of headroom that we have, and we want to make sure we've got plenty of space above our audio so that we never go into clip. Actually, with recorded sound, that's no longer true, because recording sound is entirely predictable, because we know exactly what it's going to do because it's already done it. We don't need to worry so much about having all that extra space at the top. So with the audio levels on your videos, you'll find that they'll go right up to the top, and that's absolutely fine. We can, in fact, one of the things that we can do, I don't know if you've done normalizing your audio at all. Do you know about that?
No. Go on.
So normalizing audio is something that's worth doing as well. So again, if you right click on your track and bring up this menu list here, normalize audio levels here, and what normalizing does is it takes everything up. It will scan through your audio, and it will find the highest point of any of the audio in that track, whatever you've selected. And you can select more than one track, so if you want to just normalize the entire video, you could select everything and do it that way. But normally I would do it per source, so whichever videos they've sent you, because different videos are going to be at different levels.
Yeah.
So you normalize them, right click, normalize audio, and I normalize to -1 dB. Some people will normalize to 0 dB, but the trouble is that some devices, sometimes laptops and TVs and things, they can read 0 dB as clip. And so if anything goes up as high as 0, it will start to clip it. So I normalize it to -1. One decibel is not normally enough for anybody to even hear that difference. Normally most people would hear about 2 dB of change. So 1 decibel of change is such a small amount that people won't even hear that difference. But it just means that none of your audio is ever quite going up to 0. It's always just below that level. So we can normalize to -1, and then you hit normalize and it will scan through that audio, find the highest points, and then shift all of your audio up so it's just the very tops of it are just hitting that point. So we can take everything right the way up to the top, literally 1 dB below clip point, and that's where we want the audio to be. We want it to be right up there at the very top. And again, that's where your compressors will also really help, because you will find that quite often in a track there will be just 1 or maybe 2 points that will go up as high as that, up as high as -1 or 0 dB, and the rest of it will all be considerably lower than that. And so you'll find that when you normalize your track like that, a lot of the audio will stay quite quiet, probably sort of 70, 80, 90% of your audio will stay quite quiet, and it will only be those very high peaks that will jump up. So if you put the compressor on, you can normalize it and then put the compressor on, and it will just take those high volume points down a little bit, and then you can use that makeup gain then to boost the whole of the audio up, so you're not just listening to, you're sort of adjusting the sound for the very highest points, but you're adjusting the sound kind of more evenly for everything. Hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah.
So so that's probably kind of the main bits of audio that you're going to want to do. You can then, the other thing is you'll want to probably use the little mixers. You've got the your volume controls on these as well, and you want to try and kind of make things so that they all sound pretty much the same. So your worships, you don't want a video where your kind of worship's really, really loud and your sermons are really, really quiet. You want to try and make things so they're all pretty much the same. What you don't want is people having to get the remote control out and turn the volume up and then turn the volume back down again and then turn the volume back up again, because things are all kind of doing this.
Yeah.
So you want to try and use your little levels on here to make sure that all your tracks end up as even as you can. So as you listen through it, one of the last things that I'll do before I export my video is I'll just randomly kind of jump through the timeline and just listen to things backwards and forwards through the timeline and just say, does all of this stuff sound about the same kind of volume level? And you'd go from the beginning into the middle to the end, back to the middle, back to the beginning, and just randomly drop the playhead on the timeline and listen to 5 or 6 seconds at each point and just say, is it all sounding about the same? And try and get it as nice and even as you can so that you don't get any of that kind of level jumping as it goes through. Okay, so that's audio. Now the next couple of things that I wanted to do are we're going to look at a little bit of sort of animation. We're going to do a kind of a bit of movement, and I'm going to redo, the reason I took that what was it called, titles out, the text, is because I'm going to put those in again, but this time we're going to put in ones with a bit of movement to them. We're going to start making some videos looking a little bit more interesting. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to put in, I'm going to take left lower thirds, that'll do. We're going to drop some lower thirds on over the top of this, and let's put our playhead over that. Now I've realised that my little picture is in the wrong place this time, so I've ended up at the top, which means we can't now see what's in that box. So I'm going to turn myself off for a minute, and then we can see this box up here. So we select our little text box and we can put some words in here. So we're going to put in John 3:16, and we can turn off our effects library, and we can expand that a little bit so we can see a little bit of what's going on. Okay, I think that should be enough. So we can just about see John 3:16 over there on the side. We've also got a subtitle at the minute, but we can take that out, we don't need that. And we're going to put in right down the very bottom of this list, we've got background. We're going to drop a background on this as well, so we're going to give it a little bit of height to make it appear. Right, so you'll see that the text isn't centered to the box because it's also expecting that subtitle box, which isn't there at the minute. So once we've given it some height, we can actually then recenter it. So you've got X and Y coordinates. Obviously X moves left to right and Y moves up and down. So we can adjust the box to then center it over our text. I can't really see very well on here at the minute, but something like that, that looks about in the middle. So we've got our background box to come in over our text, and what I'm now going to do is where this comes in, I don't want it at the minute. Let me play this through. Have you got the audio on that?
No.
No, I didn't have any audio either. Okay, well, let's not worry about that too much. I don't need to worry too much about the audio. So it will just suddenly appear, we play in through, and then suddenly our box is just there, it's bang, it's come up. And we don't want it to do that, we want it to have something a little bit more interesting than that. So what we're going to do is we are going to select the box, and this time go to the video tab on the inspector window over the side here. And what this allows us to do is essentially treat this text box as if it were a video clip, and so we can use this section called the transform section, which actually allows us to kind of start adding some movement into this text box. And what I'm going to do is, if we scroll down a little bit further, we've got a cropping section here, and we're going to actually use the crop tool. We're going to crop the right hand side of this, and what we're going to do is we're going to stick in one of these little points here. We drop a little point on at this point, and these little points, you can drop them anywhere along the timeline, and everywhere you drop one, it allows you to make an adjustment, and then when it gets back to that point in the timeline, it will go to the adjustment that you've just made. So this will make more sense in a minute as we go through, but we'll drop a point there at the very beginning. And I tend to find about 8 frames works really well as the length of movement that we're going to have here. So I'm going to then use my sideways arrows on my keyboard to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 frames, and then I'm going to drop another one of these little points. And you'll see there I've now got a little arrow, and that says that I can then just automatically flick back to the last one that we dropped, and I can flick forward to the next one that we dropped. And what I want to do is we can say here that on the first point, we want our right hand crop to be, we're going to take this up. At the minute there's nothing to crop out, it's kind of right over the side of the video. We keep taking it up, and now it's suddenly started cropping this video. We're cropping it. We're going to take it all the way out, so that has completely disappeared. And then by the time we hit our second point, it's going to come in. So now what we're going to see is, if we play this video through, when our text box appears, our writing is going to scroll in from the right hand side. And so we can just add that little bit of movement to it. Just gives it a little bit more interest, rather than it just suddenly appearing and then suddenly disappearing again. And just so that you can, I'll give you another opportunity to see how we did that again. We'll run through it all again. We'll do it on the opposite way around, on the end of the clip, so it will disappear again at the end. So we go right to the very end, we drop one of the little points, and we're going to go, this time we're going to scroll backwards 8 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, drop another little point, and because at the first point this time it's already where it needs to be, we want it to look like that at that point, we can jump forwards to the last point. In fact, actually, if you want to take those points out, you just select them again and it will take it out. The trouble is I've actually gone 1 frame too far, so I've actually gone beyond the end of the actual text box. So I'm going to just jump back 1 more frame so it's there again, and I'm going to drop that point there. And so by this point we actually want the right hand crop back in again. So let's take this up. We get that crop coming back in, crop, 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 crop. Okay, so again we play it from back here, we'll see the video scrolling in from the right, and then it will play through that little text box, and then it will scroll back out again to the other side. So we can just start adding that little bit of movement in, and it just gives it a bit more interest to what's going on. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, okay. So let's now take that all on one step further. So we're going to do the same kind of principle again. I'm just going to open up a folder, and I'm going to bring in another clip. So let me just get my media pool back open again here. I'm going to drop in this time some background. So this is one that I've just made up myself. It's just a little bit of a just some blue shapes moving around, nothing kind of special in this. And I'm going to drop it on the bottom layer here. Now, with the tracks, the video tracks, the higher up they go, kind of the tracks towards the top, will appear on top of the tracks that are lower down. So I've just dropped this blue star thing down the bottom over here, but we won't see it because Stuart's video is over the top of it. But it is still there, okay? And this time what we're going to do is I'm going to bring in another text box. This time I'm going to use the full text one, this one here, and I'm going to drop a text box in over here. Okay, so if I now go over that, so we should now have the text box, Stuart, and our blue shapes at the bottom, but obviously we can't see the blue shapes. So we're going to put some text in here, so let's put in John 3:16 again. I'm going to change the font this time just because. And what I want to happen this time is instead of having lower thirds text coming over the top of Stuart, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Stuart to move over to one side, and the text is going to appear on the other side of the screen. Okay, so I'm going to actually just extend this out a little bit. Now we don't have to make these things happen from the very start of the text box. I'm going to say actually this time I want to say this whole effect that we're going to start putting together here, I want to start it from this point here. Okay, so let me turn myself off again so we can see what's going on. So first of all, I'm going to start working on Stuart first of all. We need to actually animate both Stuart and the text this time. So what I want Stuart to do is I want Stuart to move to the side. So I'm going to go, I've selected Stuart's track, and I'm going to start looking at Stuart's again. We go to the transform section, and we're going to drop a little point on Stuart's position, but we're also going to drop a point on the crop as well, because we're going to both move him and crop him. So I'm going to say, so at this point here, and we're going to do our 8 frames again. So we've done our start point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and by the time we get to this point, I want you to have moved Stuart. So we're going to drop those 2 little points in, and we're going to go ahead and move Stuart over to the side, and we're going to say by this point here, Stuart, you need to be over there. And you can see now that our blue shapes have started to appear underneath because we've now moved Stuart over. But what we want to do is we want to even out the spacing. So we want to try and make this all look symmetrical still. So we're going to look at kind of where the middle of Stuart's head is, and or perhaps the side of his head to the side of the window there. And we want to try and match that same kind of distance on the other side. So we're going to also use our crop tool just to crop that in a bit further and try and make it all look symmetrical. So his head's slightly to one side at the minute, so I reckon maybe something like that's going to be about right. So now we're going to play it from here, and Stuart will move over to the side. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go back to those same points again, so we can use our little arrows to jump between our points where the things start to move. And this time we're going to select our text box, and again go to video, and yeah, there we go, position, transform position, drop a little dot on here, and then I'm going to use Stuart's one just to show me where the positions are, because as soon as I move to that first position again, I can then select this box. The playhead's going to stay in the same place, it hasn't moved anywhere. So I'm going to drop my other point here, and now I can toggle between those two positions, and you'll see Stuart moving, but at the minute our text isn't going anywhere. So at this point here, what I actually want is my text box to be off the side of the screen, so we can't actually see it at all, so it's going to disappear right off over the side. But then by the time we get to this position, I don't want it to be in the middle, I want it to be centered on the other side of the window, something like that. So again we play it through, and this time Stuart will move over and crop in, and the text will follow it in, and then let's say about there, that'll do. At this point here we're going to start moving everything back out again. So we've got our text box selected at the minute, we've put in one first point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we're going to drop in our second point, and by our second point again our text box needs to have disappeared, get it to have just disappeared there. And then we're going to jump down to Stuart, we're going to drop his little point in, we're going to go back and find our second point, which was here, and again go to Stuart, drop a little point on there for him. And actually I've realised we didn't do the crop for Stuart either, did we? Now we can just type into these boxes. Right, let's just concentrate and make sure I'm using the right box here. So we want to go to the furthest one in, so that one over there. Double click on the box, I'm going to just type 0, and that's going to move Stuart back into the centre. And now let's just go and add those ones in for the crop as well. So we'll go back to there and drop a point in on that as well. So he's going to move into the middle, and that crop is going to go right out as well by that point. So Stuart's talking, our text box appears but no text arrives, and then it all budges over, text flies in, he's reading through John 3:16, and then it all flies back out again. And these kind of things, they switch over to that one, these kind of things, they look like it's something that will take a bit of time, and it does. It takes a bit of time to begin with, and it does take a bit of practice to get used to doing that. But it's the kind of thing that actually the more you do it, the easier it gets, and it becomes quite quick and simple just to be able to put those little things in and to start making that text move around. And I think it looks so much more interesting to do it that way than it does to just have a text box just suddenly appear and then suddenly disappear again. So I think it's worth trying to learn those skills. It might take you a bit of time to get there, and it might be the first time you do it, it might take you like an hour just to do that one thing. But the more you do it, the more you can kind of get into it. And just creating that little bit of movement on them can be really helpful. We can jump back in. There is one other technique that you can also use, that if you want just something that is kind of one step up above a text box just appearing and then disappearing, but isn't quite as complicated as any of those other ones. The only other one that I could show you that can help is this. Let's just select our text box, and again we'll put in John 3:16. Oh, actually there's already a text box in the video at that point, so let's just find where that's gone. Just find a blank bit of video. Oh. Blank bit of video is somewhere, there we go, is that? Okay, right, John 3:16, get rid of that lower bit. And this time, I'm not going to bother with the background or anything this time, I'll just move it down a little bit. So rather than just having a box appear and then disappear again, the only other thing that we can do is to expand it up a bit. Grab our little dots at the beginning and just put in, let's put in something like 10 frames of fade in and fade out. So rather than just having a box that just appears and then disappears, you can make it so that the box just fades in and then it will fade out again underneath the other text. So there's 3 techniques there that you can use that will just help to make adding text to your videos just that bit nicer. There's 3 ways that you can do it. Obviously, some of them more complicated than others, but if you can start to look at using those kind of techniques to put your text in, I think it makes the video just look that so much nicer, so much more interesting to watch, and particularly when there's bits in the video that you really want to draw attention to. If there's things that you really want, key points that the preacher's talking about or key passages that they're trying to draw you to have those kind of things come in and out just makes them stand out that bit more. So yeah, little techniques there that are worth learning and developing as you go through. Okie dokie, how are we doing for time? Yeah, we've still got a bit of time. So the other thing then that we could look at is colour grading. Now actually let me pull in another clip for this one. Let me find something that will be appropriate for doing this with. Okay. So this was a little clip that I did for our service this Sunday just gone. Let's just go down the end. In fact, I'm just going to, ideally we put it on a new track, but I'm just going to stick it here for now just so that we can see it a bit more easily. Right, let's turn that one off. And we can, in fact we don't need to worry too much about that because we're going to go into the colour grading tab because we're going to look at colour grading. So we go over to this tab here, the colour tabs. Now if you're not used to doing any kind of video stuff, this tab here looks super scary when you open this up. It looks like there's all sorts of stuff going on in here, and there is all sorts of stuff going on in here. But again, we've got lots of things that we can turn on and off. So we've got in here a whole row of clips of, this is just all the clips for all our video. And you'll often find that there'll be loads more than this by the time you've got to the end of your video. Now these are really only useful for just selecting the thing that you want to work on. Once you've selected it, at the top right hand side there you can turn that bar off, which just gives us a bit more space to see what's going on here. And we can then start to do some work. Now I'm going to turn my little picture off again so we can see everything on here. So as I say, it's kind of, there's a lot in here. Let's just turn that box off as well for the time being. But I'm just going to break it down for you so we can kind of see what's going on. So bottom right hand corner we have what's called scopes, and scopes are very useful when we come to colour grading. Colour grading is in fact, let's just do a bit of a talk about what colour grading is first of all. Let's explain this bit first. So colour grading is adjusting the colours of the video and the contrast and saturation and all those kind of settings on the video. And what we want to try and do is, there's a number of things that we're going to try and do. We're going to try and match video clips. So where we have clips from different people, from different places, try to make them look as even as possible. So we know that different lights look different colours, so you can have some lights that look a bit more orange and some lights that look a bit more blue, and depending on what kind of light bulbs people have got in their homes, it can make their skin look different colours. And what you don't really want is a video where one person comes up and they look kind of bluish, and then the next person comes on and they look kind of orangey. You want to try and make everybody's skin look the same kind of colours. You also want to try and make it so that if one, sometimes mobile phones can be, they can be really good for doing video, but they can also make videos look very kind of dramatic, and the colours are kind of almost souped up a bit, and then you go to another phone and all the colours look very dull and flat, and there's no real depth to them. And so you want to try and make it as much as possible, and ultimately it's impossible to do this really with just mobile phone footage, but you want to try as much as you can to make things even and make things look natural and make things look the same, so it's not kind of changing all the time. And that's what we're doing with colour grading. So when we look at this here, the tools basically are going to come down in the left hand corner. This bunch of stuff over here, this is all the tools that we're going to use to change the colours. Obviously we've got our window up at the top, which is where we can actually see what is going on. Nodes is what we've got over here in the top right hand corner, and these you can actually add multiple nodes. I wouldn't really worry too much about that for the time being. For the time being, just focus on getting it all flat and even. If you're going to start doing colour grading, just keep things natural and flat looking. And then the bottom right hand corner is where your scopes are, and this is where we're going to see this. Gives us quite a lot of very helpful information as to what's going on in our video. It just takes a bit of time to kind of get used to those and learn what it's telling you. But the more you do it, the more you'll learn what these should all look like. So Davinci Resolve, really, this is the place where this software really shines. So you can buy Davinci Resolve. They do a paid version of this, which does give you a few extra features, but the paid version of Davinci Resolve actually is used by big kind of Hollywood blockbuster movies. They use this software for color grading. This is the kind of the big key thing that it does, and it's really very good at it. So if you wanted to start playing with color grading, this is a very good place to start. So with our scopes, we've got a number of different ones that it's going to show us. To be honest, I would tend to find the waveform, the first one that we saw, that's quite helpful, and then possibly your vector scope is also kind of helpful. The vector scope, the key thing that this can show you is you can see there's a little kind of grey dotted line here, and that is the line where skin tones should all kind of land on. And so you can just select the skin tones and you can make sure they land on that. But for the time being, let's just stick with the parades, because this, sorry, not the parade, the waveform. Because this is, I'd probably say, the one that I use most often. And what this is telling us is how bright or how dark our levels are in our videos. And generally what you want to try and avoid is anything hitting the very top. So you can see here there's things that are hitting the very top, and anything hitting the very bottom. And if you're hitting those two things, what you're actually going to start to find is that you're going to lose information very quickly in your videos. So what I mean by that is, if I come over here, I can demonstrate this. This little color wheels option over here brings up these color wheels, and we'll start looking at this a bit more in a minute. This is a really helpful little window, this window here. And we've got two little tabs along the bottom. If we go to the second tab and scroll right the way along, we've got two settings here which are both very helpful. First one's called shadows, so we can lift or darken shadows, and HL is highlights. And so we'll see what this does when I start to pull these up and down. So what these lines are showing us here, where this is hitting the very top, is these lines of white in the window behind my head all this white is hitting the very top, and what that means is there's no longer any real information in here. That is just pure white. We can't really see any detail in any of that. Now, because that's much like the audio we were talking about earlier on, when it's gone into clip, it's gone into clip and you can't ever pull that back. The same is true for this. So if I take that highlights and I pull it down, you can see that line dropping off the top, but we're still not getting any detail in here. There's no detail actually appearing because that information is just gone. It is gone forever and there's nothing we can do about that. But what you will find is that when it's super bright like that, actually that can be a little bit distracting, and that can take away, people's eyes will start to wander to the bright white over here away from my face. So actually by pulling those highlights down, we can actually make them sort of less in your face, and the attention comes off the white parts and back into the middle of the video here. So although we can't get any more information out there, we can actually pull that down and it can just shift that focus. And likewise with the shadows, if we take our shadows and drop them right down, you can see we start to squash this information all down the bottom, and it means that all these areas in here where the seat's all gone very black, we now have no information left in there. That's all just gone. But we can lift that, and we can brighten those shadows, and we can brighten them fairly significantly, and really change the look of that video. So we can really start to lift that quite a lot, and brighten that quite a lot, and make that look a lot more, a lot brighter, just a very different look. Now you can, I think if you right click on the node, I always do it with the keyboard shortcut. I can't remember the full way to do this. Well, the keyboard shortcut on Apple is Command D. I suspect on Windows it's Control D. You can toggle that on and off, so you can see what effect you've done by the adjustments that you've made. So we can toggle those settings on and off. We can adjust those shadows and those highlights. But we can also start to adjust the colours as well. And we have here the 4 colour wheels. Lift is going to be adjusting our darker areas of our video. Gamma is the middle areas, kind of mid brightness areas of our video. And gain is the high brightness areas of our video. And then the offset is like a kind of overall adjustment. So what we can actually do is we can make our shadows kind of more blue, so the darker parts of our video can become more blue. And there's a very common colour combination that's used in video all the time, because the positions that they are on the colour wheels, teal and orange, 2 opposite colours, and when you use opposite colours you actually make things stand out more. So one of the common techniques that uses quite a lot in video editing is to use teal and orange. So what we can do is we can push our shadows down towards the teal end. Our gamma is where generally our skin tones and all our faces and things like that are going to end up in the gamma section in the middle. We can push that more towards the orange end. And then our gain, our higher brightness ones, again we can shift those slightly more towards the teal. And as we start to make those adjustments, what we can actually find is that you can actually start to lift people out of the background. You can start to change the colour of the background and make them sort of more prominent in the video by making these adjustments. You'll find a couple of things. First of all, less is more with these kind of adjustments. You can very quickly start to make them look quite odd when you start pushing them too far. So just make small adjustments to begin with. And also, when you start to adjust one, that can compensate on another one, so you then might need to adjust it a bit more. So I don't know if you noticed there, but when I started to adjust the gain, I take the gain towards the blue, it actually starts to make my face look a bit less orange. So if I put more blue into the gain, I then might need to put more orange into the gamma to kind of compensate for that. So they'll sort of offset each other a little bit, and you'll need to kind of keep going backwards and forwards on those. The other settings on here that you've got is temperature. So this is where you'll find, like I say, if somebody's got a very orange light in their house and you want to make it a bit more blue, you can adjust the whole temperature, so you can make it more orange or more blue. Just tweak that temperature if you need to. But sometimes when you do that, you might also find it has a little bit of a color shift to it. So next to that is one called tint, and that will tint everything slightly green or slightly purple. And if you find that by adjusting the colors, if you start adjusting the color temperature, that it also throws the tint off slightly, you can then compensate for that as well. So if you make it look more warm, but it actually starts going a little bit green, you can then push your tint towards the purple end, and that will compensate for the green. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yep.
MD here is mid-level detail. So that is can be helpful for sort of sharpening an image up, but again, it's quite an extreme control, and you'll find sometimes that the more you push this up, the video again can start to look pretty weird. Just seeing if I can make this a bit bigger, whether you'll be able to see it a bit more. In fact, I can just zoom in a little bit. So you'll see on my face here, when I start adjusting this one up and down, when you go down, it can soften things and make them... Actually, sometimes it can be quite nice to soften things off a little bit, and it can kind of remove some of the blemishes a little bit. But you can push it up, and you can really start to... You sort of pull all the lines out of people's heads and things, and you can go a bit too extreme with it and they can start looking a bit strange. So just go careful with that one.
I can have great fun with this.
yeah, you can. And then on the first tab you've got contrast. Let's put that back so we can see it a bit more. So we can boost the contrast, and that can again just help to sort of pull things out a little bit more. But then your pivot point, now I don't have any formal training in video, so I'm just kind of very self-taught on a lot of this. I'm not exactly sure what the pivot point is doing, but basically when you push it up, it's adjusting contrast more towards the brightness, more towards the sort of the higher, brighter end, or more towards the darker, shadowy end. So if I push this up, I mean, you can see it on the scopes. Actually, you'll see the adjustment on the scopes here. If I push this up one way, you can see it's kind of compressing the higher ends a bit more, and if I pull it back the other way, it's kind of opening up the lower end. So you can see how that's adjusting, and if you watch the video, you'll see how one end kind of brightens it all up more and one end will darken it down more. And it's just the contrast. You can adjust which bit of the contrast you kind of want to affect more. So you can adjust those two controls together. Saturation kind of does what it says on the tin, so you can make your colours pop out more or less. But again, just go really careful with that, because again, you can start making things look pretty weird pretty quickly. Actually, quite often one of the things that I will do is I'll drop the saturation slightly, desaturate the video a little bit, and then on the other tab, which one is it? CB, colours. Yeah, colour boost, CB, this one. You can actually desaturate the video, but then just boost the colours a little bit with this one. And I find that effect can be nicer than just boosting up the saturation. So that's again something else that you can use sometimes. Yeah, so ultimately you can just have a bit of a play with this, and like you say, you can have a lot of fun with it, but I would just say just go really careful with it. Less is more. If you're not careful, you can very quickly start making videos looking very odd and very strange when you start messing with the colours on them. It can be a really helpful tool, and it can do a lot of very cool things, but it can also make things look very odd and very strange, so you just need to just go steady with it, and always use that Command D. You can see there the difference that we've made in that video, and you can decide whether you feel that's better or not just by toggling that on and off and deciding where you think that's looking kind of natural and even and all the rest of it. Okie dokie. Well, I think, unless there's anything else particular that you want to go through in those sort of more advanced features, I think we've probably covered enough for today. So we can stop at that point, and then next week we're going to look at exporting and kind of how we get our videos ready for putting them up to whatever platform we're going to be using, and maybe look at some of the settings within YouTube and things like that. But yeah, any other questions or anything at this point?
Just one general one.
Yeah.
Just about the organisation side of it, type thing. When you get clips in throughout the week or whatever, so you've not got everything together, do you just start to put them all into one project and have them there ready, or is there any benefit in like rendering each section then putting it all together as one big later on, or are you just duplicating work that way? You see what I mean? Or
Yeah, so there's two ways of thinking on that. Depends on how much you're going to do on color grading, I would say.
right.
The raw original files, unedited, are going to be your best bet for color grading. So if you want to start getting all your clips in and then being able to match them to each other, if you do the first section of your video and then render that out, and then do the second section of your video and render that out, you're going to have less information available for being able to do the color matching between those two sections. So
Right.
I tend to build the whole service up as one big thing, because it means that I've just got as much data as I can possibly have to do all the color correction and all that sort of stuff with it. If you're not bothered by the color correction, then yeah, you could probably get away with kind of compressing things down as you go and doing the first section and just getting that bit done. But you will just, every time you export the video, you lose some of the information. So the more you kind of import and export videos each time, you're going to be degrading the video slightly.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Lib, if you've got anything you want to chuck in the chat, then you can do. I'll read that, and if there's any questions there that you've got, then let me know. Otherwise, I think we are all done for today.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. It's really good. 101 tuition.
Yeah,
Happy days.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Libby's unmuted herself. You going to say something, Lib?
Exciting times.
Yeah, go for it. I can't hear you, Lib. If you're talking, you're not there. Just type it in.
Anticipation.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so can you remove wrinkles with the color grading? Yeah, you can. So that would be where that mid-density control comes in. So if I just zoom back in on my face on here, you can see when I use the, on the tab 2 here, this one MD, mid-density, mid-details, by taking that down, you'll see, if you look at my forehead here, the wrinkle lines start to disappear. So 0 is in the middle, that's as it is without anything kind of added or taken away. If I boost that, it will pull those lines into my face more. And if I pull that down, you'll start to see those lines removed from my face. So you can soften videos, and better than the Paris filter on Instagram, yeah. So you can start to take those wrinkles out that way. Great. Right, well, if we're all done, then thank you very much, guys. You're very
Ben, thank you very much. Really appreciate that, mate. Good
Great,
to see you.
okay. Yeah, you too. And I'll send you the details for next week as well, and we can do it again next week. We'll finish it
Love
off.
it. Great. Thanks a lot. Take care, mate. Have a good week.
Thanks. Yeah, you too.
See you later.
See ya. Bye-bye. Bye.